Hi everyone, welcome to the session of our web series, Fireside Chat with Champions, in which we interview global business leaders, asking them crowdsourced questions relevant to the biggest challenge we face today, COVID-19 and its impact on various aspects of business and the way we can steer ourselves in current uncertainties. Today we have a very special guest with us, Piyush Kumar Chowhan. He is a Group Chief Information Officer at LuLu Group International. Piyush is an experienced professional, having worked in Middle East, US, UK, and India in areas of retail strategy, business analytics, customer loyalty, CRM, retail business consulting, and supply chain management. Piyush gained extensive expertise across multiple functions, working with global retailers like Walmart, Target, Circuit City, Tesco, Best Buy, Arvind, etc. Piyush is a very well-decorated professional with various awards and is an alumnus of Xavier Institute of Management and National Institute of Technology. Thanks, Piyush, for accepting our invitation. I would request you to let our viewers know a bit more about you and your current activities and interests. Floor is yours, Piyush.
Thank you, Deepak. It is nice to be talking to you in these troubled times, and I'm pretty sure that the audience will be able to take some meaningful insights from the discussion that we'll have today. In terms of adding to a few things that you talked about, I am very passionate about working with startups. That is another kind of thing. I believe that startups are the foundations of innovations in any economy, and they basically bring in a lot of new thought processes which are out there. So as a passion, I work with a lot of startups, and I am also passionate about the digital transformation landscape which I see as of today, and how we'll kind of talk about how things are and how things will be in the future. So that we are able to get the maximum value and benefits of from the digital transformation. These are the two additions in top of the things that you also talked about. So digital transformation and startup ecosystem is something which I'm passionate about.
No, I 100% agree when you said we have seen in COVID times, right, how digital tools are of a mass use. We have been connected on Zoom, right? That itself tells us that even in COVID times, you can have social distancing, right? But you cannot have personal distancing. You can still talk to each other, and that is all due to the awesome digital tools already available. So I fully believe in what your passion is. That's digital transformation. And second, on point of startups, as I also work with a lot of startups. I've mentored few. I've created few. I strongly believe that, as you rightly said, that it brings new thought process to the whole existing mindsets. So that's the biggest contribution of the startups, and great to know that. That brings us to our first question. So, Piyush, your work has been extensively in the retail domain. So, coming to that domain, it is a very, very contact as well as perception-driven business, right? It depends heavily on the state of mind of masses, right? People buy more when they're happy, like Diwali or Eid, right? Or they want to be happy. If you are depressed and somebody feels like, go and let me buy a good mobile telephone or a nice watch, right? Women go and buy jewelry when they are depressed. In fact, my wife keeps on doing that. And so further, the news, if you are seeing that from across the globe, whether we are talking about the FMCG majors who are dealing in the typical daily essentials like P&G, or top luxury brands which own Jimmy Choo, for example, Capri, the news is not very, very encouraging for retail, right? What impact do you see on retail sector in general? And how do you see these changes in a way the product, the services, and the experiences delivered to the customer due to COVID-19 and subsequent containment measures like lockdowns or social distancing?
Sure. And I think the way I see it is retail has kind of a very wide spectrum of retail touch points. So on the one hand, you have a sector which is known as essentials now, right? Which is what has been declared by essential. And we are standing side by side to the doctors and the cleaning staff and the government to basically make sure that people are getting enough food, which is the one end of the retail sector. The other end of the retail sector is around our discretionary spend, which is where I think a little bit of impact is more, in which, as you rightly said, discretionary spend is something which has been impacted, and I feel that that will be impacted severely in the next 6 to 9 months. So if we were to paint a brush across retail, it may not be fair for me to kind of talk about that, right? So, and what I will do, I will try to break that into multiple sectors and segments. The one segment which we are talking about is the essential services. Now, what has come out is that there was a big blow in terms of how people used to shop. And that, I think, was impacted very, very drastically as panic spread across the world. Two things happened. Obviously, people didn't want a lot of fancy stuff. People wanted basic stuff. The second thing is people wanted it at the right time, at their home delivered, right? Now, doing it at a scale was the biggest challenge which most of the retailers faced. Be it the Amazons of the world, be it the Tesco's of the world, or be it any retailer who was either in e-commerce or in physical store. All the retailers were not ready or not in a position to scale up their business to the demand that anybody was kind of asking for. So that is the first realization which has come in, which means how can you deliver an excellent customer service at scale, which people are asking from an online space. Now, what will happen is, if I were to look maybe 1 year down the line, and there is a little statistics which I was reading in US, 1/3 of the people had never shopped anything online, right? Which means that 2/3 of the people were people who were doing online shopping. And the statistics, so this is pre-COVID data. After COVID, they are saying this has reached to almost 96%, which means only 4% of the people are now don't have any experience of online shopping, which means 96% of people have either tried one form of or other of online shopping, which means that you are penetrating into or kind of creating a habit which is omnipresent, which is there with every customer which is out there, right? So this is a big fundamental shift that is going to happen. And so the industry has to change, and we'll talk about how that industry has to change. But I think this is one fundamental change that you will see, in which people will, that at least that 1/3 which tasted the benefits of e-commerce, half of it will stay. Half of it may not stay, but half of it will stay, which means that the population which is going to be there for your online purchases is going to be very high. The second thing which I think is going to stay for a kind of a small bit of time is what I refer to as contactless retail, right? And this is something which is quite unique, and which I think will be continuing for some time till the real fear actually dies down completely. And people are saying that this fear will at least persist for about 6 to 9 months at the minimum to begin with. In that case, all you have to do is you have to make sure that your stores are very hygienic in nature. You are able to deliver and create services. So one of the other services which has picked up very well, I know Walmart was doing this click and collect activity for a very long time. Unfortunately, it was not a very prevalent method, because people thought that anyway, if I have to take out a car and drive to a store, might as well get down and then do some shopping, right? That was the whole perception as to why do I go and click and collect. But I think that is a segment which I think has seen about 200% increase from what it was pre-COVID and the post-COVID scenario. And a lot of retailers, including ours, including most of the retailers in the US and UK, they have moved to a large portion of their deliveries, because it is not possible for everyone to basically have a luxury of getting that delivered in the home. And the reason is that you cannot have millions of trucks which are taking the stuff all along and then delivering it. It may not be sustainable, it may not be economically good, and it may not be environmentally good. So I think this click and collect model is a very middle path which will sustain and will continue for some amount of time. If you were to now, this is all about essential services. Two big changes which I'm seeing now. Coming on to the other side of the spectrum, wherein you talk about specialty retail, be it fashion, which is, I think, the most hardest hit at this point of time. And I feel that they will still, the high-end fashion will be in doldrums for at least some moment of time. But I hope that they are able to recapitalize on the new customer preferences, because as you would rightly understand, that if you don't have opportunities, go and flaunt your dress in the flashy parties which is out there. You don't need those $100,000 or $50,000 worth of very high super premium dresses, right? If you have to just sit on Zoom and then flash off your purses, I think it is very boring, right? So that is the segment which I think need to recalibrate their design principles, recalibrate their offerings, and innovate their ways of interacting with the customer. And there is somewhere in the middle, which I think, so I talked about the essential and on the other side, very high-end specialty retail. The middle segment is where the transition will happen, in which you talk about value segment, you talk about essential needs in terms of essential clothing, in terms of essential retail services. A lot of these restaurants, right? They are at the end of it, customer-facing companies, right? They are transforming themselves into delivery companies, and so there are a lot of these kind of transformations which are out there, which will continue. And I hope that those are the things which will be for the better customer experience, so that they are able to give a experience which the customer has been wanting for a long time.
Awesome. Actually, I also believe that there would be a lot of shift in the way and what we buy, because as you rightly said, flashing your awesome Gucci purse on Zoom is not gonna give you any value addition. And in fact, I was also thinking about the high-end lipsticks and the facial makeups, right? When you'll be covering yourself with the mask, right? Then I believe that even need for that is going to change. Today, my wife was applying lipstick, and I said, actually, you'll be putting mask. Do you recall that? Oh shit! Then there is of no use. So these small things are going to change the way we do a lot of buying for sure. That's very important. So now actually, as we started talking about the consumption and the consumerism, right? Even before the COVID, if you can recall, right? A lot of people were talking about that we human beings, we are trying to consume far too more than what we need, right? And that was attributed by activists as something which is a big proponent to the climate change and environmental disaster which we are facing. And now people are talking about that environmentally we are better off because we are consuming less, because there are less traffic on the road. So if you see that actually, the consumerism has been always questioned as whether it is a good human activity or not by activists, right? I'm saying that maybe they are 3 or 4% of the whole of the world. What in your view would be the impact of COVID on the way we consume? Like with the demand reducing substantially, as you were talking about, right? People would be buying more on essentials and would be maybe not very keen to buy non-essentials. And on the other hand, also, the amount of money people are having in their hand, you and me are privileged, right? But we are also having a hit, right? We are also having a hit somewhere, like maybe not as enormous as those poor migrant laborers who are walking on Indian street, but we are also hit a little bit. But you'll find that in India, for example, 13 crore people, that's 130 million people, they're out of job, right? There is 30 to 40% cut across the board on the salaries, right? So people will have far more to spend as well. So with these two pressures, both on the demand side and typically the supply side, do you see that the days of hyper consumerism are over? So now people won't be excited by seeing an ad and go and buy a new mobile phone?
I hope so. And I honestly, I pray so. All right. If you ask me honestly. And the reason is, and I had written an article, which maybe if you can post it in your notes or somewhere, in which I said, this is a very wonderful opportunity in which the nature has kind of given a big blow to us, but given us a few learnings. And I think, as you rightly said, we always thought that we can achieve happiness by consuming more. And I think that's a myth. And that is what people have realized now. Happiness actually comes from social bonding, and which is where the biggest problem has come in. If you talk about COVID, people are more depressed, not because people are consuming more or less or are not able to go out to the restaurants. It is more because they are not able to interact with people in the way they would want. And obviously it is creating a pressure on the psyche of the human beings. And that is why the kind of so-called ill mental effects which are coming up. The second is, you talk about consumption, right? Since I've been in this food retail for a very long time. And when I was in UK, I don't know what the statistics now, at least 10 years back, when I was there was some survey which was done in which they said 30% of the food stuff goes directly from the shelf to the dustbin, which means every 10 items you buy, 3 items you basically dump it directly into your dustbin, right? Just because somebody is having a purchasing power of higher purchasing power, and obviously you are trying to source things from lower cost economies, it has led to kind of the consumption levels are so high and the wastage of that is so high that Mother Earth cannot sustain those kind of consumption patterns if it were to basically propagate. Just imagine if Africa were to consume amount of protein which the Western worlds are eating on a daily basis, I don't think it is sustainable. It is not possible at all. If, let's say, India, China, and Africa put together start to consume the amount of high calorie and high protein diet that the Western world is having, I think the world will collapse. And I think this is an important time for us to rethink on that. How can we make sure that we are consuming which is good for our health, and it is good for our nature as well. So I've been kind of reading a lot about what they now call, and I think in the Eastern countries, particularly in Japan, they have started what is known as minimalistic living, right? And that is something that we should say that even with minimum means, we can live happily, we can sustain ourselves, and we can see the benefits of that in nature, which will then reward us to make sure that this world is a better place for us to live.
That's really awesome answer. Believe me, this is something which I directly connect with. So whenever my son say that, Dad, you speak a word called awesome a lot. I said, this is actually something which unfortunately is being given to me by America. I travel there a lot, and everybody wants to become amazing, right? And that's the biggest problem. You have to think that we have seen the Western movies, and we believe that to happy you have to have a big car. To be happy you have to have a fleshy clothes. To be happy you need to have all the outerly things. But if you go to the movies of the East, you'll find that there is a monk who gets pleasure by being in being what he himself is, right? So again, we'll have to start thinking the way we have consumed this is not gonna work in the long run. And as you rightly said about the wastage, I would like to connect the dot here, because I work very closely in the food and agriculture sector. And 30 to 40% of fruits and vegetables, they are wasted, right? 18% of them actually don't even leave the shop front, right? So even on the shop front, once they're in the shops, right, they are not being sold off. This is creating a lot of challenges, because if we just save that, we would be able to feed 200 million more people, right? We are having close to 800 million people who don't get their nutrition. But just think about, by just reducing waste, right? We would be able to save 1/4 of them from the misery of going to bed without food. So you are rightly said that actually we have to stop, the wastage which we are having.
Yes.
So, if you have worked a lot on the essential part of it. How do you see that, the wastage can be reduced using technology? Do you see the technology having a role here? The traceabilities and the smart packaging and all that?
Correct. Absolutely. And I think that is what, why that was happening was because, there was a lot of this, I would say, global sourcing, which is out there, right? And one of the biggest change which will happen, and I hope that it happens for the good, is that insourcing and local sourcing is something that will pick up significantly high in all parts of the world, right? And what it means is, you will try to eat what is seasonal, you will try to eat what is local, you will try to eat what is grown in the local environment, which is conducive to the local temperature control, local habits, local hygiene, and so on and so forth. So what it does is, it will reduce a lot of these transportation, which is all creating this carbon gases and all those things. So the global supply chain is one big industry which I think will see a little shift. I would not say drastically, but at least it will start seeing some of the shifts from being a very, very globalized chain to something which is more localized. And as I think we were having this discussion before this, countries like, let's say, GCC, right? In GCC, it is very difficult to grow anything. Now, people here, there are other countries where let's say in Europe, you can grow almost anything in the summer season. But even in Middle Eastern countries, where it is very difficult to grow things, people are thinking that how can we become more sustainable? How can we become more self-sustained, so that we can produce things, so that we are able to fulfill the needs of the consumers from the produce which is locally done here. And automatically that will bring the cost down, because bringing in bananas from Colombia is not a simple thing, right? Or bringing in bananas from Philippines, which is where they come from. It creates so much of pollution, it creates so much of waste of effort everywhere, which I think can be channelized to better things in life.
No, 100%. And luckily, I interact with companies and the policymakers in UAE a lot. And this whole the funding push towards agri-tech, right, from vertical farms to typically arid zone crops. In fact, there is a organization called International Center for Bioceline Agriculture. They are doing a lot of great activities to ensure that UAE become food secure by its own means. So those great things are happening. So as we have touched upon technology, let me go a little bit deep on technology, right? And someone who is having actually mastered that part of it, right? I would like to understand from you, your perspective on digitization of retail business as well. How do you think it will coexist with e-commerce? Because as we were pointing, in the US also now 94 to 95% people started doing e-commerce. Now the million-dollar question is that so far the conventional retail people used to see e-commerce, which is trying to take their business away. Especially, I'll give you context from India, where we have also worked a lot, right? The small kirana store start seeing that actually, because you allow the FDI in e-commerce, then it will eat away my business, right? Now, Amazon trying to go with the kirana shop guys because they were protesting too lot, saying that we'll also put you in the loop in the e-commerce plan we are having. And that Reliance Jio is doing something totally different, they are planning their own things. So, now people are more confused, right? That how this whole thing is gonna evolve going forward from the perspective of entrepreneur. Should I get into this industry? Where should I get into this industry? Or as an investor, that should I invest more in e-commerce driven companies? Should I invest more in the local part of it? If you've heard about Prime Minister said, make local global, right? Believe me, I don't understand that, because if I make my local global, then somebody else's local is also global, right? So my local won't be local. So again, these are the times where it has confused people a lot. Someone expert in this marketplace, I need your perspective that how do you see the conventional, the commerce using technology, digital technology, e-commerce evolving, and as you rightly said, something in between which you were talking about. Elaborate a little bit more on that click and buy thing, because I got fascinated with that idea.
Sure, and I think I will kind of paint a picture as to how the industry has evolved, right? Retail, if I take a kind of a scenario of the last 100 years, the way it has evolved is, earlier it was all mom and pop stores, right? And that is how the whole thing is, and that is how people thought that yes, that is the first evolution of retail, which I think remained there for almost 50-60 years. And then in the 60s or 70s in the Western countries, people thought that if I start making it bigger, there is economies of scale and there is benefits of prices that I can pass on to the customer, which is where the big box retailers started coming in, right? Be the Walmarts of the world, be the Tesco's of the world, and that is where the real boom of so-called retail, big box retail started. And they thrived on two things, right? One is obviously scale, and the second is global sourcing. They were able to match the demand and the supply. So they were able to bring in customers which are local, which are kind of having high propensity to buy, and source it from the locations wherein you can get stuff at a very cheap. And that is how they were, and the margin between that the two is what they were trying to make the cut out of. And that continued, and they basically went on, and they were kind of eliminated most of the mom and pop stores in the Western world, right? If I were to talk about India and other places, we are an entrepreneurial society, right? In which India is a land of shopkeepers, as they call it. And so every nook and corner you will have somebody who is a shopkeeper. Unfortunately, that impact has not yet happened in India, and the small mom and pop stores are continuing. While this was happening in the Western world, the digital commerce guys came in, right? And they basically started entering into the easy segments of the market. And even if people may feel that it is like the e-commerce has taken over the retail market share, actually not, right? And the reason is they are still only 25 or 26, 27%. That is the kind of market share that e-commerce has. So 70 to 75% market share is still owned by physical retail. And my view is that physical retail is going to continue, not in the shape and form that it is today. E-commerce will also continue, not in the shape and form that is today. And so what is the new kind of retail that we're talking about. And so if you see what Walmart and the Tesco's and the Target did, that they said, I have the physical store, I will try to bring in online customers to shop so that I can fulfill from the physical stores, right? What is Amazon doing? Amazon is saying, I have an online store. Now I will buy, let's say, Whole Foods, and then I will try to see if I can fulfill something else. So there is a little bit of confusion and a tussle which is happening between the online native players and the physical native players.
Right.
And what has happened is, in the middle of this fight, everybody has forgot who they are trying to sell to, right? And the reason is the customer is really confused. And as you rightly said, the customer is very confused. And if you ask somebody in any consumer, he will say, online is good for discounts, but not for everything. This is the common perception which is out there. Yeah.
True.
And if you ask the other segment, they will say that, okay, offline is good, but some of the purchases I have to still go and do my comparative study in online, and then I will purchase that. And so the customer is not able to get the best of both the worlds in either of the models which is out there, and which is a unique opportunity which I think somebody has to solve. I don't know who will solve it, but which is the true sense of customer-centric retail, which is around trying to understand. And that is what my previous boss used to say, that let us not follow a technology trend in terms of doing retail. Let us follow what the customer is doing, right? And it is such an important essence in which, if the customer feels that he wants to shop from anywhere, he should be given that choice, be it the store, be it the physical location, be it the click and collect option, be it the pop-up shop, be it the various forms, the new forms that are coming up. And believe me, doing this is absolutely difficult. It's not easy. Yeah, because you are talking about creating a shopping experience which is unique to each and every customer, and doing it at a scale which is unimaginable. So for example, if we are talking about, let's say, even in India, if we talk about we will assume that middle class and above will be around 20%, 20 to 25% of the population. 20 to 25% of the population is about 30 to 35 crores. Yeah. And doing that at scale to give a unique experience to that many customers, because you would imagine everybody has its own shopping preferences. How much ever homogenized that we feel we are very divergent in terms of our eating habits. We are very different in terms of our fashion habits, in terms of our eating habits, in terms of a lot of other things, which is what retail kind of caters to. And so it is very important that how can we do this kind of hyper personalization at scale, which is where the winner would be. Who is able to do it? Google is trying, right? Now Google is saying that every shop in the world, they will try to bring all the listings and then present it in their platform, and then let the customer decide what or he or she wants. Yeah? Amazon is trying to do that, right? Jio in India is trying to do that, and Tesco in UK is trying to do that. Walmart is trying to do that. Only time will tell who is able to understand the real taste of the customer and real preferences of the customer, so that he or she is served better from the services which are out there. And that's where the trick lies.
No, awesome. That's the awesome perspective, because for very simple reason is that, as you rightly said, people have to start thinking about the customer and giving them what they really believe to be something which they aspire to have as a service. So as you talked about, doing all these things, where we talk about Google, Tesco, or Amazon, it would be backed very strongly by various type of technologies, right? So for example, if Walmart is experimenting too much with the blockchain, you find Jio is trying to experiment too much with the data part of it. You have Amazon experimenting with big data. So they have been champions of creating humongous amount of data for every businesses, even that business needs or not, but still they say that actually do a lot of things with data. I've been seeing your own talks as well as your article. You're someone who very, very is fascinated by actually the big data and the data analytics also. Plus, you're having a awesome track record in the analytics part of it. We would like to understand from you, which technology green shoots you see, right, coming up would be totally new type of technologies, or those existing technologies you see will become more relevant going forward when it talks about, like, as someone who is a chief information officer of a company, where do you see that your company identifying that let's talk to these type of people or talk to these type of technologies and totally dump these type of technologies? What are the green shoots you are seeing?
No, I think I don't see any new emergence of technology. It is all about, I think there is a cartoon which is going around in which it's asks a question: who did the digital transformation in your company? And there are three choices. The first choice is the CEO, the second choice is the CIO, and the third is COVID-19. Right? and people are saying that COVID-19 is what brought digital transformation in any company. And so I strongly believe that these technologies were always there. What has happened is the adoption, and I think we are living in an age which we sometimes term as hyper adoption age. And unfortunately, I think digital was something which was talked about. So I'll talk about the first part, which is around use of data. Right? It is very important and known to people that use of data for any kind of decision making is the key to success in today's context. Right? Be it any decision, how much to buy, what to sell, where to open the shop. All these decisions are something that people have taken in the past with a lot of qualitative data, but those days are gone. It is more have to do with quantitative data, right? In which you have to understand what is going, what is not happening, and those data models is something which will give you the right answer. And I don't think anybody denies that fact as of now. But having said that, this is statistics about of up to last year. Harvard did a research and across, I think, the Fortune 500 companies. And can you believe it found that in an organization, only 4% of the data is actually used for decision making. 96% of the data is kind of living there in a database somewhere, which is not used for decision making. Right? And so there is a huge potential of using this data to really make decision and choices. And that is something which will happen very fast. The second is, when you have this data, use of artificial intelligence and machine learning models is going to increase significantly from now. And this is again the second trend. So I think we know about the SMAC kind of stack which is out there, right? The social mobility, analytics, and cloud, right? All these technologies are there, right? The adoption of those will be much more faster. It is one thing which I'm kind of taking my neck out and say that yes, this is something which is going to happen. And the trick here is, if you do that in conjunction with keeping the customer at the center of your decision making process, that is the trick which I think a lot of people are missing at this point of time. Technology for the sake of technology is not yielding any results. So people are doing a lot of cloud transitions in the last 5-7 years since the cloud is there, right? All they are doing is they are basically taking the existing application and putting it into the cloud. Doesn't give you any benefit. The benefit will come when you transform that application, make it customer centric, make it based on microservices architecture, and then put it on the cloud, which is where the benefit lies. So this blind following of just some of the terms which are out there without understanding and making it relevant to the customer is not going to benefit out of it. And this is one of the differentiators which I feel is coming out, and that can happen only, and I would emphasize the word only, if you are transforming your organization into an agile organization. Now, this is the fundamental foundation that an organization has to be transitioned into. And I'll give you some examples, right? Panera Bread in the US, right? It was known for their cafes where people used to walk into their stores for hot bread, coffee, muffins, and things like that. Yeah. Now, as COVID hit, they understood that people will not walk into their cafes, and their business was almost at a standstill. Overnight, that company said they had a little bit of digital presence, but it was more to send the coffees and the breads and the muffins which is out there. They immediately transitioned themselves within weeks to kind of make them a essential delivery service organization, right? And these kind of transitions, I would say, in pre-COVID times would have taken months and years for people to strategize, to bring in a digital consulting company. They will work on a plan, and they will basically create a roadmap which will go on for six to 12 months. And then what was done in weeks was the real benefit of what digital transformation we're talking about. And there are a lot of examples which are coming out during this time. And why some of the organizations are able to do it is because they are agile. Their ways of working are more experimental, in which they say that, look, the only way to work in the future is to come together, experiment, learn from it, and move on. Which is why startups are able to deliver something which is faster, is because of the agility. And I think large organizations need to adopt that agility into their ways of working, so that they're able to get the value and the benefit of the digital transformation that they're talking about.
Great. So in fact, I fully agree with you when you smile about the consultants. I do provide consulting to a lot of companies on digital transformation. I've been doing it for past 2 years. And believe me, you will be surprised. Initially, I was very excited that actually I'm bringing a total new direction, new thought process for the top management. And generally, my buying used to be at the CEO or the MD level or the board level. And they used to be very excited. And you'll be surprised. Majority of the time, those are the people who are most worried, and they don't want to push the envelope. They'll hire a consultant, and I said that actually like 3 months, we will be through all the process, and I'll give you complete direction about what you need to do. 3 months is too short even for us to think. I said, then you should not even think about digital transformation. So you are right. People love that actually. And a lot of my colleagues used to tell me that, Deepak, you're trying to put steroids in people who don't even want to have a basic medicine, right? So go slow. If you really want to have this business to roll out well for you, plan it. First 3 months, we'll do the analysis of the company. Next 6 months, we'll talk about how to get that transition in your organization. And then 3 months, I'll give you the rollout plan. Make it for 12 months, then you'll fly. When you say 3 months, then people say, like I said, but actually it doesn't need more than 3 months, right? And if you take more than that, it is lost. And I've seen most of the organizations which extended it for more than 3 months, they never did it. They were some very awesome organization because of the NDAs, and cannot talk about them. But believe me, they completed the complete transformation in flat 3 months. They did. And believe me, it impacted their business. Some of them were talking to me and saying that people, we have got a productivity increase of up to 30%, right? So those magic happen. But as you rightly said, that the same job, that COVID make you do the digital transformation. Maybe that's the great thing to happen. Now, this brings us to the last session of our discussion. I would like to understand, you work met a lot of startups. If I'm an entrepreneur or a startup and I'm reaching out to you, tell me 4, 5, 6 things, right? Where, as someone who want to work in retail industry, right? What would be your advice for me, right? Both the generic advice as a startup, right? At the same time, very, very specific advice that in case I want to make big, right? And do some value addition to the customers in retail industry, what I should be doing. So what would be your silver bullets for them?
Correct. So I think obviously what is happening is, I was seeing some report which was done by NASSCOM in India, and they are saying about 60% of the startups have impact of their revenues of somewhere around 40 to 60%. And I think there are only 15 to 20% of the startups which have not seen an impact, which means that the large section of the startups are seeing impact in their revenue generation and things like that. So obviously these are difficult times. It is not that I don't acknowledge that this is something which is understood and is very common. But there are a few things which I think I did it in my LinkedIn post as well. There are 5 things which I feel can be used by startups. One is, how can you continue to do sales by cutting down on almost all of your sales pipeline or sales SG&A cost, as I call it, which is out there, right? Make sure that your OKRs which are out there, which you have listed, are still intact. Don't change your product roadmap, or don't change your outlook. Just seeing that what will happen in the next 3 to 6 months. If you are trying to be there for the long haul, try to reduce the cost as much as possible. Make sure that you don't change your roadmap. The third is obviously there will be some impact in terms of your ways of working, but how can you make sure that your people are still occupied, even though you must have lost some of your pipeline? How can you do free POCs? How can you do kind of pro bono activities with some of the corporates? And I think any help which you extend to any organization at this point of time, if somebody says that, okay, help me build a very quick DevOps pipeline. Okay, if you feel that you have a set of DevOps engineer, please throw that expertise and capability to an organization to help them if they are your customer and they are not requiring your service or your product, right? So basically, how can you ensure and make sure that obviously you would expect the organization to give you something. The one good gesture that you can show for the work that you have been doing with your customers is, how can I help you, right? How can I help you be more agile? How can I help you deliver something faster for you? How can I do something in DevOps for you? How can I do for something in automation testing for you? So some of the startups have some of these best engineers, and if you don't use them effectively for the next 3 to 6 months, which is when the impact is, you will lose them, and that is the biggest blow for a startup. So don't allow that to happen. Please extend free POCs. Please extend working on areas that you may not be doing pre-COVID times, but you are you think that you have capability to deliver that to your customers out there. Look at cost savings, and that's a very important aspect. So obviously, a lot of them had taken some fixed spaces and things like that. I think what is coming out is work from home and co-working spaces are the only way going forward. There is no need for you to go and have rents being paid when you don't need them. And at the end of it, if you have any cash with you, please make sure that you store and conserve cash. That's because cash is the only king which is out there. So if you had to do these 4 or 5 things which I kind of highlighted, you would be able to scrape through this. And if you feel that you are not going to sustain, if you sincerely feel that you are not going to sustain, don't shut it down, reinvent yourself. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of startups that I'm speaking about, they're trying to do that as well. So it is time that not only organizations need to reinvent, I think startups also need to reinvent. Because if you think that your business model is not going to be relevant in the coming years and the decades to come, it is rather than accepting a mistake and then reinventing yourself is the best solution in that context.
No, I fully agree. And pivoting yourself, thinking about what is going to happen in next 6 to 8 months, that's very, very critical. Because as you rightly said, that world would be very, very different place post-COVID. We are already seeing those signs, right? And some of the industries, for example, when we talk about the startup in the space of travel or tourism, they need to, or even the restaurant, the food, right? They need to start thinking about it, because people might not be just looking at experience. They might be looking more of their own safety. So as you rightly said, that pivoting is very, very critical. And coming from someone with such an experience like you would make a lot of people understand it better than when I used to tell them. So thanks for seconding that idea. And Piyush,
if I were to just add to this, right? So there are 6 headwinds which are out there. Obviously, there is an impact on a lot of industry itself from an existence perspective. So look out for those headwinds in the industry that you are in. There will be a lot of changes in the regulatory framework, right? So we talked about a lot of insourcing coming in, a lot of global regulation, supply chain processes getting impacted. So look at regulatory changes. The customer behavior is changing, right? Some of the pivoting, if you are done based on pre-COVID times, there is strong evidence that customer behavior will change post-COVID, right? Which will also, when I talk about customer, it's the individual customer as well as the societal changes which are out there. And the last is obviously technology. So if you look at resourcing and the technology which is out there, if you feel that out of these 5, 6 pointers that I talked about, you try to basically assess and understand where you are And do you think if any of these headwinds that I'm talking about is going to significantly impact you, you need to repivot yourself, rethink, and then re-energize, and then relaunch yourself.
Great, Piyush. In fact, it was a big learning for me as well. Like, after being in the industry for a long time, and you kept the best for the last. So what you added in the last few, say, just half a minute, is something which is a big takeaway for anyone, including myself. I learned a lot from this discussion, and I'm very sure that actually audience would have gained a lot of insight coming from someone like you. And it's pleasure to talk to you. Thanks a lot for being on this web series session. Stay safe. Look forward to meet you soon.
Thank you, Deepak. It was nice talking to you. I hope that people love it and keep the good work going. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.